Alright, today we're going to start a new module. That's module 6. It's on geometry. We'll cover topics such as angles, triangles, quadrilaterals, polyhedrons. We'll look at some solid figures and what those cross sections look like, and we'll even dive into some surface area. To get started, the first 4 lessons deal with angles and angle relationships. So before we go into any of those lessons, I want to do a quick video and illustration on some of the angle relationships. Some of these may be familiar to you, and we've used them in the past. The first relationship is adjacent angles, and this is discussing and talks about angles that are directly next to each other. So angles A and B are adjacent to each other, meaning they're directly next to each other. They are not the same measure. They are not congruent. The next angle relationship are vertical angles. And there is a special relationship here. These are congruent. They do have equal measures. So angles A and B have equal measures because they are 2 lines that crisscross each other, and they are opposite of each other. So if A equaled 20 degrees, B would also equal 20 degrees. Same thing works for the angles that are this way, angles X and angles Y. They would also be vertical angles, and they would have the same measure. Alright, the next one are angles that are on a line. And if we look at the line, they're discussing line AB, that is 180 degrees. So any of these angles on line AD will add up to a sum of 180 degrees. So A plus B in this case equals 180 degrees. Very similar to a relationship coming up called supplementary angles. The next to take a look at is angles at a point. At a point that is referring to is point A, and this has to do with circles that go in a full circle, or angles, that go into a full circle. They will add up to 360 degrees. So every angle around that point, such as A and B and C, they will all add up to 360 degrees. Complementary. The relationship is that they add up to 90. The sum equals 90 degrees. So in this case, if we had A plus B, those would add up to 90. A and B will add up to a sum of 90 degrees. The example they have is 30 and 60, which does add up to 90 degrees. Last but not least, supplementary. Same idea as complementary, but this time the sum is 180 degrees. So A plus B equals 180 degrees. Their example is 120 and 60. So now that we've got some background on some of the relationships, let's go ahead and start some of the exercises. The learning target for lesson 1, I can solve for unknown angles in word problems and in diagrams involving complementary and supplementary angles. Again, complementary adding up to 90 degrees, supplementary adding up to 180 degrees. We will look at, the majority will be diagrams, pictures that will be drawn with angle relationships, and we'll have to figure out what certain angles are. The other ones will involve word problems. This first one is a diagram. It says, in a complete sentence, describe the relevant angle relationship. So we must describe. We have to write an equation for the angle relationship shown in the figure and solve for x. So it's several parts here. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the diagram, and we're going to observe that this line is straight, which means it is 180 degrees. So we know that 22 degrees and x together combine to make this 180 degree line. In words, we can describe this as angle x and 22 degrees are supplementary, which we previously know that they will add up to 180 180 degrees. So x plus 22 equals 180. We'll take a minute to solve that equation. Subtract 22 from both sides. And we have found that x equals 158 degrees. Let's take a look at a word problem. The measure of two supplementary angles are in a ratio of 2 to 3. Supplementary, 180 degrees. Ratio of 2/3, or 2 to 3. Find the measure of the two angles. So if we drew a quick picture, we know that it's 180 degrees, and we know we have two angles, angles A and B, that will add up to 180 degrees. The only thing we know about these angles is they're in a relationship of 2 to 3. So we know that we have to have something plus something, which will add up to 180 degrees. Well, let's say we don't know what those somethings are, so we use variables, and they are in a ratio of 2 to 3. So the way we notate that is angle 1 is 2 parts of every 3 parts of angle 3, or of angle 2. So the relationship here, this is where the ratio comes into play. The angles are in a ratio of 2 to 3. Now we have an equation that we solve, so we combine like terms to 5x equals 180 degrees. Divide by 5, x equals 36 degrees. Now we're not done with that yet. We then have to find the two angle relationship, or the two angles themselves. And we know that angle 1 is 2 times the 36 because of this part of the ratio. And 2 times 36 is 72 degrees. And angle 2 is the third part. So multiply by 3. 108 degrees. Let's take a look at another one. Number 2, in a pair of complementary angles adding up to 90 degrees, the measures of the larger angle is 3 times that of the smaller angle. Find the measure of the two angles. We know that the small angle plus the large angle is going to equal 90 degrees. We also know that this larger angle is 3 times the first. So if the first one is x, the second larger one has to be 3x. So, and we know they add up to 90. So we'll rewrite this up here to give us room to work. Combine like terms, we have 4x equals 90. Divide both sides by 4, x equals 22.5 degrees. That is the first measure. The second measure is going to be 3 times the 22.5. 3 times 22.5 equals 67.5 degrees. So we have our two angle measures. Number 3, the measure of a supplementary, the measure of a supplement of an angle is 6 degrees more than twice the measure of an angle. So we need to notate that we are working with supplementary angles. They add up to 180 degrees. And we know that we have two angles, and one of them is 6 more than twice. 6 more than twice. Well, if angle 1 is x, we know we have to add something else to equal 180. 6 more than twice x. Well, twice x is 2x. And the 6 more would be plus 6. So angle 2 is in parentheses. Angle 1 is this single x. We still have two angles that add up to 180 degrees. Combine like terms. We have a two-step equation to solve. Subtract 6 from both sides. We're left with 3x equals 174. divide by 3 on both sides, x will equal 58. We have not completely solved the problem. We have just solved for x, which happens to be the first angle. However, the second angle is going to be 2 times 58 plus 6. So the second angle will be 122 degrees. All right, number 4, we're moving right along. The measure of a complementary or a complement of an angle is 32 more than 3 times the angle. Find the measure of the two angles. Complementary adds up to 90. Same idea here. We've got one that's 32 degrees more than 3 times the angle. So if the first angle is x, the second angle has to be 3 times x plus the 32 more equals 90 degrees. Combine like terms, 4x plus 32 equals 90. Subtract 32 from both sides. We're left with 4x equals 58. Divide by 4, x equals 14.5. First angle is 14.5. Second angle, we have to take and multiply 3 by 14.5 and add 32, which brings us to 75.5 degrees for the second angle. All right, example 2. Two lines. The two lines that they are defining are these lines in purple. Two lines meet at a point that is also the vertex of an angle. So the angle, I will outline in blue. And the information about that angle is we do know that it's a 90-degree angle. Set up and solve an appropriate equation for x and y. All right, we know that 16 degrees and y both add up to 90 degrees, so because they are complementary. 16 plus y equals 90 degrees. Subtract 16 from both sides, y equals 74 degrees. We have solved for part of this problem. We have taken care of finding y. Now that we know y, we can solve for x. Actually, we're not even going to use y. We know that, yeah, we are. We know that angle x and angle y add up to this straight line of 180 degrees. It's kind of hard to see, but this x is referring to everything from purple to blue. Not just the 90-degree angle, but from purple to blue. So we know that x plus 74, which is essentially y, equals 180 degrees. Subtract both sides by 74. X is 106. All right, so those are our first few problems for this lesson 1. Why don't you go ahead and look at the problem set and try to finish that. If you need to go back through this video, watch it again, pause it, read some more, study the work, feel free to do so.